You and Rick Ross aren't close anymore?
I ain't gonna lie, like, not really. As of lately, nah.
Y'all don't talk at all?
Nah. Shout out to 50 Cent, man.
Oh, I never would have expected that.
I know, right? Yeah.
Was there anything that the industry did to you that you've never actually publicly said out loud?
I mean, I could go in. I could just...
Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams from Triple C's to MMG taking over the industry to trying to put G-Unit up in a guillotine to now 2026. It seems Rick Ross's day one has truly seen the day come where hate sprung out of the gates of an underdelivered rap career. Gunplay raps a tier above most, but his rapping peers have run close to the top. Meanwhile, Gunplay never had a moment or drop even as close to a quotient as hot as the music members of MMG manufactured during their massive run. So the love for the crew has spun into a scuffle or two. Gunplay saying him and Rick Ross might be done being cool and exposing the evil behind the luxury group of Maybach Music. Guys, do not confuse it. We'll break down the exclusives, but first all I need you to do is subscribe and like for the stupid bars I'm producing.
I study rapaholics for a living.
Now, Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams, when you think about Maybach Music and the hip-hop conglomerate that Rick Ross built, obviously your usual suspects like Meek Mill and Wale come to mind. You might even think of Omarion. Yes, he was really signed to Maybach Music. But what if I told you that the longest standing member of MMG, the first artist on the roster, and the artist who by far has the craziest life story of any artist that was affiliated or signed to MMG is by far Gunplay? I'm sure most of you guys remember Rick Ross's beef with 50. Yeah, well, Gunplay got jumped outside the BET Awards over that beef. Just as recently as his 44th birthday a couple years back, he actually threw a trash bin at the DJ of his party because that DJ played a 50 Cent song.
Why would you play that? Why would you play that?
Yo, Gunna, it wasn't even like that, bro. I'm serious.
Do you know where you at? Do you know where you at? What's his name?
But now, just about 2 years later, Gunplay is actually praising 50 Cent in interviews.
Shout out to 50 Cent, man.
Oh, I never would have expected that.
I know, right? Yeah, shout out to him. He posted me on his
I seen that.
Yeah, man, shout out to that boy Fifth, man.
Well, maybe the recent olive branch that Gunplay has extended towards 50 Cent could derive from the fact that he doesn't seem too happy with the very man that put him on, the very man that he came up with. In fact, Gunplay is exposing every shady business practice, every evil, manipulative industry tactic that Rick Ross and his record label pulled while Gunplay was in the thick of his career trying to make a name for himself. If you've ever wondered why Gunplay never attained the same level of success as a Wale or a Meek Mill, Gunplay tries to answer these questions, but does it come with a bias? Does he lack accountability for his own actions? How did we even get here in the first place?
When I'm signed to a label like Maybach Music, I'm my hands tied. It's all up on the big dog, and then if he don't want to get me a budget, then he won't get me a budget.
You and Rick Ross aren't close anymore?
I ain't gonna lie, like, not really. As of lately, nah.
Y'all don't talk at all?
Nah.
Was there anything that the industry did to you that you've never publicly said out loud?
I mean, I could go in. I could guess.
The reason I say that Gunplay has the most insane life story of any artist on MMG, I say that with no exaggeration. The things this man has been through, very few artists can say they have as well. And what's sad is that Gunplay really is a phenomenal rapper. One of Kendrick Lamar's best songs of all time features Gunplay, and I'm not talking about Lefty Gunplay, who's on Kendrick's song TV Off. No, this video is for people who grew up in the 2000s, not who were born in the 2000s.
Yo, shout out to all the 12-year-olds in the building. What's up?
And if that's you, you probably know about cartoons and cereal. And at that point, it really seemed like Gunplay was about to be next up, was about to be out of here. MMG was in its prime, and as a matter of fact, a prime Kendrick Lamar had actually been a huge fan of Gunplay, and that's how the collaboration came about.
He was like, man, I really want to do a record with you, man. It's called Cartoons and Cereal. I need that talk. And I'm like, oh, trust me, bro. That's all I have right now, dog. When I got back to Atlanta, where I was hiding at, I did it. You seen what happened, man. Like 2 weeks later, everybody told me how I kicked the nigga on his own record. And I'm honestly, when I first heard his name, I didn't know who it was. It was super early. The first thing that came to my mind was a basketball player.
Thought about Kendrick Perkins, probably.
Some Lamar Odom, something. I would love to do a part 2. I would love to work with him again.
Yeah,
the fans just didn't make it look good how they just kept airing him out. Boy, you got bodied on your own. Damn, Gunplay.
So how did an artist who people claim washed Kendrick Lamar on his best song, arguably of all time, end up in a position where he was never able to have close to the success of the peers on his label? And even though he was signed to one of the biggest labels of the 2010s, he's now beefing with the CEO instead of being able to thrive in retirement. Well, let's understand how this went down in the first place. See, the reason why it's so crazy to see Gunplay and Rick Ross beefing today is not because Gunplay a couple years back had set up a GoFundMe, Rick Ross became the biggest donor, and then Gunplay gifted him a chain as a sign of appreciation. We'll touch on why that's insane quite shortly. But no, the reason why it's crazy that they're beefing is because they actually met when both Gunplay and Rick Ross were around 15 years old in the mid-90s in Miami. At the time, both of them were up-and-coming artists, but Gunplay was actually signed to a local record label, and the owner of that label had discovered Rick Ross. So he brought Rick Ross onto the roster, and from there, Gunplay says him and Ross had the mission of making it on their mind, and they would not take no for an answer.
I knew Ross since I was 15, man. Okay. We met through a mutual friend. I was the mutual friend's first artist on his independent label, MIA Productions. And he said, man, I met this new dude, man. He sounds like a down south Biggie. His name Teflon Don. And I met him, and we both had that same drive, man. Like, I didn't meet anybody that had the same intensity that I had to make it. Right. To want this shit bad as
But see, around the time that Gunplay and Rick Ross were trying to make it in the industry, Gunplay needed money. He was told that he would have to repeat the 9th grade, so he decided to instead drop out, and along with music, he pursued a career in selling crack, allegedly. And I'm sure you know the saying, don't get high on your own supply, but Gunplay unfortunately was not that guy. While he claimed to be sober in this interview in 2013 with Complex, he had said that he started selling coke at the age of 16 years old, and one day he just tried it and liked it. And according to him, he hasn't stopped ever since, even with his mom finding the substance within the household. Gunplay claimed he was spending $600 to $700 a week on drugs, and that amount increased to thousands of dollars a week once he signed his label deal. Now you'll see later in this video, the actual beginnings of Gunplay signing a major label contract were very problematic foundationally in terms of just the financial situation, and Gunplay kind of points a finger at Rick Ross and other people around him. You guys will be the judge once we break it all down. But there was one thing that was undeniable, and that was Gunplay's loyalty. See, Gunplay played the background while Rick Ross began to blow up for many years. It took over 10 years after Gunplay first met Ross in the mid-90s for any motion to actually occur. And of course, the spotlight was placed on Rick Ross first. In 2006, Every Day I'm Hustling completely took off, and while Rick Ross, Gunplay, and some of their other hometown friends formed a rap group together, Rick Ross began his career as a solo star and promised Gunplay that if he stuck around while Rick Ross got bigger, they would eventually release their group album together.
So after 10 years of doing this, not getting paid, not getting no money, watching everybody around us get rich, that's when we got Every Day I'm Hustling. When we got Every Day I'm Hustling, we already had a group. It was me, a dude named Torch from New York, and him. Once we got on, he stuck to his word and put the group out. You know what I mean?
Gunplay here says something kind of interesting. He says that he was not able to get solo music of his own, not even just released, but recorded in the first place. He wasn't able to record because once Rick Ross blew up in 2006, they were touring so much, and Gunplay was only able to record by 2008. Now, again, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe, again, Gunplay was just being loyal to his longtime friend, accompanying him on tour and, you know, making sure Ross was the main focus, and that's why he wasn't recording. But something to me sounds a little fishy. I mean, you're next to a rapper, right? You probably have decently easy access to a studio. Why did it take you 2 years to start recording your own music? I don't really get it.
Nah, but I was putting shit out. We got on 06. My first mixtape was 08, and that's only because we was touring so much, I didn't have time to record. Right. You know what I mean? Right. But I've been putting shit out since 08, man, and, you know, I'm going to take my opportunity, bro. I ain't going to sit down and...
So I'm not sure what exactly was stopping Gunplay from recording his own music, but he was featured on several Rick Ross albums. He wasn't credited as a solo feature on any of the projects up until 2009, because again, they were all a group under the name Triple C's. It was Gunplay, Rick Ross, Torch, and Young Breed. But he was on Ross's first album in 2006. He was on Ross's second album, Trilla, in 2008. And by the end of 2008, I guess Gunplay ended up finding a recording studio because he finally dropped off his first mixtape, Sniffer Hill, the First Gram, in November of 08. The mixtape didn't make much noise, but Rick Ross did keep good on his promise to help the entire group flourish, because in October of 2009, Triple C's released their first and only project, Custom Cars and Cycles. The project sold around 12,000 copies in the first week. It wasn't a great success, but that's not to take away from Gunplay's ability to spit some insane bars. Gunplay is a highly underrated rapper, and I mean, again, if you guys didn't grow up in the 2000s, it's likely you probably never even heard Gunplay rap. So, I mean, just take a look at like the pain and the aggression in his bars. Even on a freestyle as casual as him eating some takeout food in a luxury hotel lobby.
Silver spoon, goon, clear the room. My life been hard since I crawled out the womb. I live where I never see the back of eyelids. Ain't no sleep here. Well, maybe once every leap year. No tears to weep here. So weak, ain't ate a whole week here. And my mind too sick to be kid. M-I-A-O, yeah. Miami material world. Lizards and birds. Coffins and urns, and much profit to earn. I got mine, get yourn.
Now, this freestyle was actually recorded in the same clip where Gunplay was going off on 50 Cent. Now, I'm sure most of you watching know about the Rick Ross and 50 beef, but again, Gunplay at this point in time was standing right next to Rick Ross and was actually his most promising artist at the time. This was about 2 years before MMG really vamped up with artists like Meek Mill, Wale, Stally. Ross had a lot to prove with this 50 beef because, yes, Ross is a great lyricist, but he was no Jadakiss. And would he get Ja Ruled? Or would he checkmate 50? I mean, we're approaching the internet era at this point, guys. It's 2009. 50 Cent is leaking Rick Ross's baby mama's S-tapes, filming vlogs where he pulls up to DJ Khaled's mother's place of employment and films her sleeping on the job. And the pressure was definitely on Ross, and Gunplay was right there next to him, and his loyalty, him being an ally to Rick Ross at this period of time, definitely put a lot of new eyeballs on Gunplay. I mean, he was in all of Rick Ross's retaliation vlogs against 50.
Imagine what Tony Yayo life really like. That boy can't afford that $20 Coke habit. He finished. But it's like ever since 50 put out the gay tape, all his confidence went out the window. That was the biggest seller you had in the last few years, that Lloyd Banks gay tape. They say Lady Gaga and them play that shit on tour all the time. Yeah. So for the niggas who into that lifestyle, I don't knock them.
Now that Rick Ross had kind of won the public perception in the whole 50 beef, the spotlight was on him bigger than ever, and with Gunplay being his sidekick, this kind of opened the door for Gunplay to really start making some noise. But funny enough, it actually didn't necessarily happen with Rick Ross. Instead, Gunplay's big break came from a feature he did with Waka Flocka in that same year of 2009 on the song Rollin'. Gunplay claims that it was actually the feature he did on this track that got him a deal, but it didn't get him an actual budget. Meaning, like, he was now signed to a major record label, but he didn't actually have the advance or the money funded from the label to go and work on a debut album just yet. He had to continue building his buzz. But nevertheless, this feature with Waka Flocka Flame officially puts Gunplay on, and he's now the flagship artist for a short period of time of Rick Ross's imprint, MMG.
When I took off with Rollin' with Waka Flocka, that was my, okay, now I'm here now. Right. Now I'm in the game. You never really got a budget for it. That's neither here nor there. But just like you said, what if I was to get that all that money and that fame and that stardom at that time when my mind was, yes, you know what I mean? So I don't regret anything that I didn't do or did do.
By 2011, I mean, Rick Ross starts going all out with trying to actually expand MMG. But when you're talking expansion from a business perspective, that usually involves placing your chips or your bets on what seems to be the most viable or most profitable investment. And Rick Ross had his chips everywhere. I mean, aside from the actual artists he did sign, he was trying to sign French Montana, Wiz Khalifa, Nipsey Hussle in around 2010, 2011. Imagine he actually got all three of those artists on the MMG roster. Would have been crazy. But he did end up striking gold, of course, with Meek Mill and Wale. And those two artists specifically were probably some of the worst artists that Gunplay could have asked to join his roster because it made it very easy for Gunplay to be overshadowed. For one, I think Wale was a better actual technical lyricist than Gunplay, but then on the opposite end of things, Gunplay was a street rapper, but so was Meek Mill. Meek Mill was just better at putting out hits and putting out more captivating mixtapes. But Rick Ross did Gunplay dirty, man. I mean, he was not included on either album cover of the MMG self-made compilation albums. Like when the whole label got together to do projects together when they were at their peak commercially, Gunplay's face was not on either of the covers. Now, according to Gunplay, I mean, the reason why he never got a debut album out during this time period when, MMG was on top of the world in the early 2010s wasn't his own fault. Again, you can ask yourself, is he not taking enough accountability? He claims basically he had a hit with the song Bible on the Dash, and everybody, including Rick Ross at the label, loved it. However, what did Pusha T say? You're signed to one guy who signed to another guy that signed to three guys. That's bad luck. Well, basically, remember how I said earlier, Gunplay signed a record deal, but he didn't actually have a budget. Meaning like the label, again, wanted to see that Gunplay actually could, produce a hit single before they spent money behind him. Well, here was his hit, but he still had no budget. So he had to go to Rick Ross to get permission to have a budget for this record. And because, again, you're signed to one guy, signed to another guy, signed to another guy, Gunplay says it was like a whole ping pong back and forth with the major labels, Ross saying, we need to get permission from the higher-ups saying, go back to Rick Ross. It was a whole back and forth that really went on, according to Gunplay, for a year and a half. And by then, of course, the hype of that song, Bible on the Dash, had died down. And sadly, according to Gunplay, this is what actually led him back into a life of crime.
When you're signed to somebody that's signed to the major label, you have to go and get the permission from the person that you signed to for them to okay the budget from the major label. So once I got my hit record, I just got ping-ponged back and forth. We're ready, I'm ready, you're ready. And then nobody ever was ready. So a year and a half went by and the song died down, my money died down. I had to get back outside and slap a nigga with the iron and handle my business like I was before. You see what I'm saying? And who wants to do that? That was like a call for help. You know what I mean? Like, yo, it's broad day robbing shit.
And around this time period, while things would be only getting better for everyone off of MMG, Wale, Meek Mill, Rick Ross himself, things would take a really dark turn in Gunplay's personal life. In April of 2012, Gunplay would allegedly rob his own accountant at gunpoint, with security camera footage leaking of Gunplay walking into his accountant Teron Woodside's office, allegedly angry over a dispute about money and taxes. Gunplay comes into the office with another man. During the argument, he pulls out a pistol. In the footage, you can see him pointing what seems to be the pistol at the accountant. And about a month later, charges were pressed, with prosecutors saying that Gunplay and whoever he was with stole a gold chain and a cell phone during the confrontation. They also described it as a near-death robbery, and he was charged with armed robbery with a firearm, aggravated assault with a firearm, and assault with a deadly weapon. And if he was convicted on all these charges, prosecutors said he could have faced life in prison.
The Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office released some surveillance footage, so let's take a look. So it appears to show Gunplay trying to choke a man behind a desk after he's shown what is presumably his tax return. It looks like he also pulls a gun and punches the man in the head before he takes his necklace and leaves. Prosecutors say he came back later and threatened his accountant with a gun again. Gunplay turned himself into Miami police on Saturday over an outstanding warrant for armed robbery and aggravated assault with a firearm.
Now, the thing is, an arrest was issued for Gunplay in May of 2012, but he actually avoided the arrest for months and only turned himself in 5 months later in October of 2012. And what kind of sucks is that during this house arrest time period is when Gunplay had some of the biggest strides in his actual career and his biggest chances of actually making it on another level, right? This is when he had Cartoons and Cereal with Kendrick Lamar. This is when he had those major appearances on the MMG compilation albums. Rick Ross was at his mainstream peak and he was collaborating with Gunplay quite heavily. Gunplay even made it onto a Lil Wayne album around this time, but still couldn't get the budget from the label. Things would get worse, ironically, actually, in the middle of Gunplay, according to himself, quote unquote, being on the run for this armed robbery charge. Because in the summer of 2012, again, just a couple months after that, a warrant was issued for Gunplay's arrest. He actually gets into an altercation backstage at the BET Hip Hop Awards with G-Unit affiliates that were, of course, linked to 50 Cent. I can't play you guys footage of this, but you can look it up. It's all over the internet. Gunplay's Maybach Music chain was allegedly taken, and you could see 50 and his crew, speaking to TMZ, right as they left the BET Awards that night after the fight had just went down.
50, what happened at the awards, man? I like the answer. That's all I need.
That was a nice tribute.
They gave out awards.
What's crazy is Fat Joe around this time had actually claimed that it was because Gunplay got into this fight at the BET Awards that Rick Ross and 50 Cent were never able to make amends. This was around the time that Fat Joe had actually squashed his long-standing beef with 50, and of course with Ross being a close affiliate to Fat Joe, Joe claims he wanted to, help Ross and 50 make amends as well. Apparently 50 and Ross were both on board with it, but then of course the altercation happens with Gunplay backstage, and that's what Fat Joe credits as being the nail in the coffin for good for any chance of a reconciliation between Rick Ross and 50 ever again.
I'm gonna do what other niggas ain't do for me. I immediately went and found Rick Ross because he was at the award show. And I said, yo, my nigga, I squashed the beef with 50 Cent. He squashed it with me. Like, yo, what's up? And he was like, yo, I'm gonna move how you move. So I'm thinking I'm about to squash the Rick Ross 50 Cent beef. Like, I was there. I think he was like, yo, big homie, I'm with you, whatever you want to do. But I get to the back and they fighting Gunplay. And I was like, oh,
shit, I remember that.
This is not gonna happen.
Yeah,
this
wild.
is not very, very good.
That was wild.
This is not very, very good. I cannot squash this beef ever again. Like, I thought I was going to be the UN summit. Some beefs you can't squash.
Now, while it's very sad that this altercation may have been the reason why we never saw 50 Cent and Rick Ross squash their differences, Gunplay detailed what actually happened on that night where, he got into that whole fight with the G-Unit squad at the BET Awards, and his description of this thing is absolutely hilarious, you guys.
And I look and I see my dog like
Getting up out of there.
hey man, going for 50 at his jawline right here. And that's when I felt they put me into a helicopter. I was in a helicopter. I don't know what happened then.
This nigga. Were you truly dolo?
Yeah.
Nobody 20 yards away.
And I go to hitting them with the whoop wops. Motherfucking police hit me with the best spray. I'm like, damn, bro, I was just about to get off on your. You know what I'm saying?
There was a chain that was took.
It wasn't took. That shit fell off my neck.
Oh, well.
Now, things would continue to get much worse for Gunplay. At the height of MMG's stardom, Gunplay was out partying all the time, and remember how I said earlier in this video, he claimed to have spent thousands of dollars once he got put on drugs on a weekly basis. Well, at one point on this journey, he actually ended up nearly suffering an overdose.
I wish I would have been a little bit more focused. And I had, flying shit in. That's when they had the clean beans, blue dolphins, all that golly. Tongue kissing every bitch in the club. Hey, money falling out your pocket. 5 drug minimum. That's what they used to call me.
How did you survive doing all them drugs? Did your heart almost bust, did you?
Man, nah. Thank God I never had no. Well, I had OD'd on some ketamine by mistake. I thought it was cocaine, and I went into a K-hole. It was like some shit where I got stuck, and it was weird, bro. Like.
Over the next few years, Gunplay's career would kind of pivot into different places. He would end up getting married to his girlfriend Vonshay Taylor Morales, and they would appear as a couple on Love and Hip Hop. His music career wasn't necessarily getting close to the levels of, the biggest stars off of MMG. He did finally put out his debut album in 2015, but it only reached a peak of number 171 on the Billboard charts. And after that, we never saw him put out another record under the MMG label again. But he says the bag at Love and Hip Hop was good enough. So it seemed like Gunplay had found a new career path for himself. However, everything would fall apart in the summer of 2023. In August of 2023, Gunplay was arrested in Miami after a domestic incident involving his wife and their 6-month-old daughter. According to police reports, the situation began when his wife asked him to lower his voice while he was yelling and playing Xbox because their baby was sleeping, which led to an argument that escalated quickly, during which his wife says that she tried to gather her belongings to leave the room with the child, but Gunplay allegedly prevented her from leaving. And authorities allege that during the confrontation, Gunplay threw objects, including glass cups and liquor bottles. Then he retrieved a rifle, pressed it against her while she was holding their infant daughter, and threatened her life, leading to his arrest later that night on multiple felony charges, including aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, domestic violence, and child abuse. And following the arrest, his wife publicly stated that she and the baby were safe and that Gunplay had relapsed into substance abuse and developed severe drinking issues. She also said she obtained a restraining order and planned to divorce him. She also shared a video clip from several weeks prior where her and Gunplay seemingly got into a separate altercation where she had threatened to take away his Xbox, and this led him to allegedly break a television in their house with a frying pan.
Let me know.
Yeah.
So we're gonna record.
Yeah.
You threw all my shit, right? All my shit is gone?
Hit me with it. You want to hit me with it?
I'm gonna touch you.
Okay.
Everything's gone? Is everything? Did you
go
throw out my
ahead and
shit?
do what you're doing.
Did you
Please
throw
go ahead
out my
and
shit? Did you throw out my shit? You think I care about a charge? Did you throw out all my shit for me wanting to buy another bottle of Hennessy? Huh? Let me know. Let me know. Man, you's a cop. Let me know.
The morning after when he sobers up. Let's go get me a new TV now.
Yeah, we gotta go get a new TV. We'll be right back with the new one.
Now, it's important to note that Gunplay denies all these allegations. He says that his ex-wife had fabricated everything that she accused him of, everything he was arrested for.
Allegedly said I upped the stick on her, pointed it to her, threatened her with it, and then choked my baby.
That sounds wild.
I know, right?
Sounds wild.
15 years in prison. You know what I mean? This is what a nigga looking at on a totally fabricated, made up. I thought this was a joke. I thought she was gonna do this and then the next day be like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me, I'm not gonna come to court. But she played it out for 2.5 years. She just tried to revoke my bond. And the situation never happened.
In fact, Gunplay actually says that because her story wasn't credible, because she kept contradicting herself, they actually ended up throwing out this case, and it's now over. But at the time, he did lose custody of his daughter. He was also restricted to supervised contact with her and spent nearly 2 years on house arrest tied to these charges. So it's unclear, where he now stands with his child, but apparently, all these charges were dropped because, according to him, she made them up.
I beat it May 12th of 2025.
Okay. So that case got shut.
Case dismissed.
Yeah.
Case dismissed. They just basically said she wasn't credible enough to even stand trial, man. She just lies so much, and the state was basically tired of it. They were entertaining it because they had a thing where, across the nation, they're cracking down on DV prosecutions. You see what I'm saying? So they seen she lying. They've been here before. They deal with millions of these cases, but they on a shit. They want you to go to jail. So, but she didn't have a strong case to begin with. Once time kept going on and she kept revealing that, once you tell a lie, you have to continue to tell that lie. And she was in court contradicting herself, online contradicting herself. And it just got to the point where it was just so messy the way she was doing it that it was inevitable for me to beat this case.
Thankfully, his daughter is alive and well, but she was actually born with a rare heart defect. And at the time, when Gunplay and his wife were still together, they set up a GoFundMe to fund her surgery, essentially, their daughter's surgery. And Rick Ross had ended up, donating the largest amount, which makes sense, right? Of course, Gunplay had been right there with him since the mid-90s. And at the time, Gunplay was extremely thankful to Ross for this generous contribution.
My daughter was born with a rare heart defect, and everything went smooth after the operation. And Rose, I want to thank you. You gave, a very, generous contribution, to my situation, dog. And my family thanks you. Thank you, my brother.
I'm gonna be honest, you my brother for life, brother.
I know.
You don't even gotta mention it.
Nah,
your family is my family.
After everything with his daughter's health was thankfully sorted, Gunplay ended up buying Rick Ross a diamond chain as a token of appreciation for the contribution that Ross donated to his GoFundMe. Now, I'm really not sure why Rick Ross had to be lying in bed like, he was a sick hospital patient or something while Gunplay was handing him this chain, but that's what we have here. But it actually prompted all the donors, or most of the donors of that GoFundMe, to request their money back, because they viewed it as a fraud. They thought, okay, if this guy could afford diamond chains, but he's out here asking for money for his daughter's surgery, obviously it was just a scam, and he, in the end, really had the money, right? So Gunplay claims he actually had to pay back a 5-figure sum to all the donors who requested their money back from the donations they gave to Gunplay and his wife. All because he wanted to stay down with Ross, express his loyalty once again, and give Ross a chain.
Just for everything, man. Just for being a boss.
You already know what it is. And this how we live, this how we move. We always been dogs, man. I appreciate this. And boy, that motherfucker heavy. Animal shelter, I'ma rep it for life.
Gave my my big homie, man, Rick Ross, a chain. And everybody, they say they wanted a refund. 4 months later, 5 months later, everybody that gave $5 and $10, they said they wanted a refund. And I had to pay the tab. So I'm not gonna get into the numbers and shit like that, but I paid, basically, I took a L. A nice 5-figure L for nothing, because people think I used their $5, their $10, and bought a chain.
This was just in 2023, right? Gunplay was so loyal to the point where he gave Rick Ross a chain for this donation that obviously he needed for his daughter's surgery. Then he had to give back thousands of dollars to the people who were pissed off that he gave Rick Ross the chain. And instead of asking for the chain back, he said out of his own pocket he ends up spending this money. Now, this leads us to 2026. Remember everything we've discussed in this video, because it gives important context into where Gunplay's headspace is at today. Remember that he has been right by Ross's side since the early 2000s, was signed to Rick Ross's label by the late 2000s, and takes a beating by G-Unit for Rick Ross, but then ends up mysteriously leaving MMG by 2015. Throughout that time period, Gunplay also claimed that he was never actually allotted a budget for his debut album. That whole time that MMG was on their run, Gunplay never had a budget, or money, aka, to release an album of his own, right? And at a time where he actually caught fire with his song Bible on the Dash, at a pivotal time in not just his career, but his life. When he was, facing life in prison, he has this song that has the potential to blow up, along with the steam that he has from Cartoons and Cereal with Kendrick Lamar. And instead of getting the budget, the label starts playing ping pong. Ross says that, they need to check in with Def Jam to approve the budget. Then Def Jam says that, the budgeting is all on Rick Ross and the people who run MMG. They're going back and forth, and it ends up being a year and a half before Gunplay can even put the song out officially, and by then the hype is gone. And even with that, Rick Ross still ends up giving him a donation, and Gunplay gives him a chain in return. But then, of course, you guys know what happens next. He gets put on house arrest for that altercation with his wife, and faces 2 years on house arrest. And now it's 2026. Apparently the charges are dropped, and he's back trying to make his resurgence into music. But he's got a little bit of a different kind of approach or perspective when it comes to how he speaks on Rick Ross today.
Spicy.
Maybe Rick Ross didn't call or check in during that whole time that Gunplay was on house arrest, facing all these charges, couldn't see his daughter, who knows? But he keeps it strictly focused on the business, and basically comes at it from the perspective that Rick Ross never displayed the same fraction of loyalty that Gunplay did towards him, and that after all those years of being down with MMG, he ended up actually getting robbed from the people who were handling his business at the time. And Rick Ross was basically holding him back more than actually, helping his career progress forward. Again, there's not much accountability here, but at the same time, of course, this is a man who went through a lot and was definitely done dirty by the industry. There's no denying that, but there's always a balance, right? There's two sides to every story. So is Gunplay 100% right on this? Or could he have done a lot more to get his career where he wanted it to be? Well, you guys be the judge, and then we'll see what Rick Ross thinks of this whole situation.
And I'm gonna be totally honest and transparent, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? I ain't the type of to sit here and sugarcoat shit. But when it was Ross' turn and we was on the road and we was doing everything, and then when everybody was a group effort. When it was Gunplay's turn, it was crickets. You see what I'm saying? So it's like it was hard for me. What you want me to do? Nobody's. It's like I got hit records. Nobody's giving me a budget. Nobody's doing nothing. So what you want me to fucking do?
Hit.
What would you like me? What would you like me to do? Do more? Do more? Give another hit record and do more and never get no money? Or would you? What you want me to see is go back in these streets and go ahead and tap these pockets,
right?
Like I have to do. You see what I'm saying? Like this is what I did. This is what I didn't want to do.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But since niggas don't understand and niggas want to be, okay, we don't know who Gunplay is. Fuck. Give me that chain. Let me get all that because I'm back. That was literally a cry for help for real when I look back and see that now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Let me get that.
Right.
Let me get that. So
you showing them like I really would do this.
Yeah, push me back in the street. So I mean, what you really want me to do? Like, I'm for everything. I was down for the program for over 10, 15 years. And it's my turn. And then nobody lifted a finger, made a phone call or nothing for the old boy. You see what I'm saying? So what you want me to fucking do?
That's crazy because you have some killer features.
Yeah. But then when I'm signed to a label like Maybach Music, I'm my hands tied. It's all up on the big dog. And then if he don't want to get me a budget, then he won't get me a budget.
You and Ross aren't close anymore?
I ain't gonna lie, like not really. As of lately, nah. I'm, you know what I mean. But
y'all don't talk at all.
Nah.
Was there anything that the industry did to you that you've never actually publicly said out loud?
I mean, I could go in. I could basically sold my publishing for $50,000. They gave me $25,000 up front. We never did a second Triple C album for me to get the other $25,000, but I still ended up paying back $50,000.
What?
Yeah. Sony ATV, this is facts. And then my first album that I dropped, Matt Middleton and a bitch named Megan Price that was managing me at the time, they thought I was cooked. Yeah. So what they did was amend my contracts. So my back end of $75,000 for my first fucking album, it went to them. So I got fucked for that. So fuck Matt Middleton, fuck Megan Price and everybody who put potholes in.
Now, the thing is, again, there's a couple perspectives to have here, right? Gunplay, like I said before, was an incredible rapper, highly underrated, right? So much so to the point where a young Kendrick Lamar on the cusp of dropping Good Kid, Mad City specifically, called up Gunplay asking for a feature, and people argue that Gunplay washed him on that record, which is arguably one of Kendrick's best records. So kind of crazy, that side story. But I say that to say, maybe Rick Ross did have the power to give Gunplay a budget to actually get his debut album out when MMG was at the height of their run, and maybe Rick Ross really stopped it because he knew that Gunplay would end up overshadowing him. At the same time, you had guys like Meek Mill, Wale, who for a decent period were far outshining Rick Ross from like a sales perspective, right? So Rick Ross never really seemed like the type of label owner that wouldn't want to put his artists first, right? I mean, he wasn't like Diddy, where he was all up in the videos dancing, or Birdman doing the hand rubs in every music video, and then, all these reports would come out that Birdman wasn't paying his artists. I mean, as a matter of fact, Rick Ross even called out Birdman for not paying his artists, right? So from the outside looking in, it did seem like Rick Ross treated his artists well. And from Ross's perspective, he replied in two separate videos. And in the first one, he's going on tour to basically celebrate the 20th anniversary of his Port of Miami album, the very same album that, got him and Gunplay that first major look. And in this video where he announces the new tour for this 20th anniversary, he actually, takes a little shot at Gunplay and emphasizes like, hey, instead of complaining on podcasts, you're a veteran. Why don't you go out and do something? You got opportunities, you fumbled them, and now you just want to complain on a podcast. It looks weak.
The Port of Miami 20-year celebration, the live tour, orchestra, choir. I've never done that. The live tour, the orchestra, the choir, 20-year anniversary for Port of Miami. I want to just salute everybody that was down with me, supported all my records, Push It to the Limit, Pots and Pans. I'm bad. Of course, every day I'm hustling, and we still hustling. We told them it wasn't just a record, but it was a lifestyle. We meant it. Here we are. We still in love with the game. We still in love with the culture. I hate to see old veteran niggas on podcasts complaining about the opportunity they had. I'll never be a complainer.
But here's where it gets interesting, you guys. Rick Ross got a little more honest with the whole situation when he was swimming around his pool. I guess the thoughts started flowing once the sun started glowing on his massive forehead. And here he kind of details to Gunplay, or gives him some answers and some closure as to why the budgets were never opened on his career. And the reason is essentially the major that they were signed to, Def Jam, wanted nothing to do with Gunplay. They didn't like his music. They didn't think he had the potential. And Ross claims that Maybach Music, everyone associated with it, and Ross himself didn't want to break Gunplay's heart, because he says, you're always one hit away from making it. And if the label did see that there was potential with one of your records, then the budgets would have been opened up right away. But Gunplay never had that major hit. He never had something that, was worthy enough of the investment into his career. And so while Gunplay's on these podcasts talking about, hey, I had that song Bible on the Dash that was gaining buzz, but then it was like a whole ping pong thing between the major label and Rick Ross telling me going back and forth, and then the buzz died down. Ross on the flip side says, no, that wasn't the case. It was that the major label just really wanted nothing to do with you, but I knew that if I kept telling you to keep hustling and I didn't, give you the bad news, you would have kept grinding, and eventually you would have caught fire, and then, you would have been off. Your career would have been out of here. But it just never happened because you didn't keep grinding. You ended up going into that life of crime, right? Remember how Gunplay says they didn't open the budgets for him. He couldn't really get things shaking with music, so he had to turn back to crime. Ross says that's probably the reason why your career never ended up going anywhere. Also clown Gunplay for being on Love and Hip Hop with the woman who he would marry and then get in an altercation with that would lead him to 2 years of house arrest.
And not laughing at my little bro's situation, because I got nothing but love for him, but the situation he talking about was saying wasn't no budgets or nothing like that. The distributor had done dropped you. They ain't want nothing to do with you. MMG just ain't give you the bad news. We told you just keep working, just keep grinding. Don't stop, don't quit. Yeah, that's how it goes. When they don't want to spend no money on you, ain't no more budgets. You ain't have a manager, none of that. So they ain't tell you. And I ain't want to break your heart. I want you to keep hustling. I always say you one record from being on top.
Now Ross says, although he just spent, a good 2 minutes or plus slandering Gunplay's name, he says there's no Gunplay slander unless it comes from the boss himself, all right?
Anything, and that go for all you niggas in my DM. No Gunplay slander will be allowed in my DM. If there's anything negative about Gunplay, I'ma say it. You can't say it. Mind your business. Just couldn't wait.
So now when it's all said and done, we actually do wrap this story up with Gunplay taking some accountability and kind of clearing the air on how we got here in the first place. He says that, his head wasn't in the greatest space being on house arrest for 2 years, and he thought, maybe people weren't checking in on him like Ross, people who he'd been loyal to for almost 20 years. Maybe they thought he really did these crimes, right? And he claims he actually passed a polygraph test, like these charges are fully dropped, and he thinks, maybe people didn't reach out because they thought he did it. And at the same time, resentment starts to boil. So he comes back on this, comeback tour and starts being a little more transparent than he maybe should. And that's where Gunplay says he takes accountability for. Now, at the same time, he says he actually did have a budget. See, MMG in around 2013 had moved from Def Jam to Warner Music Group. Gunplay, for whatever reason, did not move with the label. Like, he was still signed under Def Jam. He claims that he actually did get a budget in around 2012, 2013, when he was quote unquote on the run, but it was just a 1 album budget. And this is around the same time where, you know, he was claiming in earlier podcasts that he had that Bible on the Dash record that he had to play ping pong with the labels with because they just couldn't actually get him the money to invest in it as a real single to try and make it a hit. Because of course, you know, to make a song a hit, you do need money to get it on the radio, to get the promo and all that. But ultimately, Gunplay did want to emphasize, like, you know, this shouldn't have been taken to the internet, and he didn't like that the narrative had got to where it got to.
So I saw he recently responded to you. You know, he was in his pool and stuff like that, and said something about with the distributor and stuff. You want to speak on that?
Yeah.
I'll touch on that real briefly because you know, but I really don't. I hate that I'm here with it. Not here at the podcast. Right. I hate that I'm here with it.
Yes.
I'm gonna go address that real quick. The district, I got a budget. Yvette sat down with Steve Bartles. Yvette was in a meeting with Steve Bartles when Steve Bartles was the acting president at Def Jam, and Steve Bartles was like, "Yo, who's next? Who we putting out this year?" And Yvette said Gunplay, and this was like a year after Rolling. Like a year after Rolling, it died down. I was already on the run. I went broke again. They gave me the deal. So I actually did get a budget, but it was kind of those shelf budgets.
Yeah.
Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, I only had 1 album with them. I think it was just 1 album. So it's like, why couldn't I go over there with Warner? I don't know why, but whatever. But I did get a budget. I ultimately got a budget. You know what I'm saying? But I just hate that I'm here with it. And I'm gonna take accountability for being too transparent with family business. How about it? What you say?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think that's what really was what the problem is, and I take accountability for that. I know about all of this royalties, garbage, and all of that. I wasn't getting. I knew that years ago. I never said nothing.
Right. Yeah.
I'm down for the program. I love my brother.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm gonna always get my coin. It might not. I'm gonna double it and triple it, and I'm gonna do what I gotta do. I even if I have to start over 100 times, I've done it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it was just too transparent, and it stemmed from me being 2.5 years on house arrest.
Yeah.
How Pac said it, niggas not giving me no money, no fame, no tribute. Nah, I'm here doing it. Nah. But it was like, I was a lost thought. I wasn't even talked about nothing. And I said, damn, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't do it. I passed the polygraph test. I didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then I'm like, maybe niggas think I did it or something. I said, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Okay. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a shame that we didn't see Gunplay more dominant in the early 2010s. Of course, you know, a lot of the legal drama mixed with the fact that MMG was on top of the world and there was a lot of star power on there kind of held Gunplay back from seeing the success that many people who listened to his music knew he deserved. But the bright side is, today, you don't need a budget. You just need a microphone and an internet connection. So hopefully Gunplay can turn things around, and hopefully his friendship with Ross can as well, and we could get some more music from them. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I study rap
Akademiks
for a living.